Cool. And then start summary. Beautiful. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. After our month-ish or so break from Telecon series, we're back at it. I don't have any huge overall announcements. AGU abstracts closed. I think if I remember right, I saw that there were 11 abstracts submitted to the PyHC session. So that's great. We don't know obviously yet if there's going to be a poster or an oral session or how that'll go, but as soon as we know, I'll let y'all know.
Julie, did you say 11? Oh, well, that's great. Last time I checked before you went on vacation, we still had zip. So this is great
Yeah,
news.
yeah. People, that's the name of the game. Everyone always submits kind of, right up against the deadline. And I expected that. So, anyhoodle, yeah, we've got 11 in there. Deadline is today to submit AGU abstract decisions. Thanks, Rebecca. In any case, that was the main overall announcement I'd had. Sean, do you have anything to say before we get the ball rolling?
Yeah, a few things. One, I guess I could mention that later on today, after our little presentation, we're going to be doing a small vote for FEP2, which is just a template for helping you write FEPs. So it's not a very exciting one, but it's useful and helpful nonetheless. And I guess on that note, we also do have a few other ones that are floating out around GitHub right now. I guess I could put links in the chat if you wanted to, but FEP3 I've got open up to help standardize the package versions that we support on like a sliding time window basis. And then Julie, you got FEP4 up there doing the package tiering stuff.
Yeah, I shoved that one in right before going to South Korea.
Yeah, we're definitely not voting on those today, just letting you all know that they exist. Um, and I guess, Julie, have we officially announced yet that our HSSI proposal got accepted?
Oh yeah. Sorry, jet lag brain. Yeah, so I put in a proposal with several people on the call on the proposal team for a new heliophysics software search interface effort to go under, and that was part of the NASA Roses, I guess technically 23 call, and it was selected. So very exciting. Once I have more information and the funding in hand, I'll give y'all some more details and plans and so forth. But since that got selected, there'll definitely be some components for talking through, what kind of metadata we want to see and so forth as a community in, that kind of search interface. And that'll be a component at our fall meeting. So just look out for that.
Sweet. That's all I had.
Beautiful. Thanks for the reminder. I would have completely forgotten about that. A lot of things happening. In any case, cool. All right. Well, that seems to be all the big overall announcements we have. So now I want to go ahead and turn it over to Zach Bouquet. Did I say your last name right?
Yep, perfect.
Beautiful. All right. Feel free to go ahead and steal the show.
Just making sure y'all can see this.
Yep.
All right, perfect. All right. Well, hi everyone. I'm Zach Bouquet, and my project is building tools to analyze FAIR for HDRL datasets. My mentors are Dr. Rebecca Ringette and Dr. Brian Thomas. And hosted here is my GitHub where this project is, as well as my DOI. And while my internship has ended this past Friday, if you'd like to contribute or reach out, I'll try and stay on top of that for you. So the Heliophysics Digital Resource Library represents all NASA-hosted heliophysics data and resources through the Space Physics Data Facility, the Solar Data Analysis Center, and the Heliophysics Data and Modeling Center, or Consortium, excuse me. And as far as the motivation for this project, as NASA data repositories, we're required to align with FAIR practices, where FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And so we need a way to measure and report our basic compliance with FAIR. In comes this project where we are interested in developing a frequency distribution of the metadata fields for basic FAIR, a distribution and mean of calculated FAIR scores, and a way to programmatically test the data accessibility. And all of this is going to help prioritize where we should direct our improvement efforts. So FAIR, as I said before, stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And it's a set of guiding principles that enhances data and metadata for humans and especially machines. On this chart here, this kind of gives us a little blueprint as to the metadata that we are going to be extracting for this project, such as the persistent identifier, and by extension, the citation info, as well as the data usage license. If you'd like to learn more about FAIR, I have some links here provided in the slides. I'll share the link with y'all shortly. And for software specifically, there is some FAIR principles for software. However, while it is slightly different, the basics are the same. And with that, I'd like to mention that the project was split into 2 stages. The first being the space metadata analysis, where I first wanted to extract the space metadata from the space records, the NASA space records. This was done using the element tree package in Python. And I had to follow some very specific logic that I'll talk about in the next slide, due to the formatting of the space records. Some of the metadata fields have multiple locations from which from where you can extract it. But anyways, once I extracted the metadata, this was stored into a SQLite database, from which I then queried to determine what was present and acceptable, as well as calculate some statistics and report the results. For the second stage of the project, this was to check the NASA data access links. And some stipulation for this stage were that we're only checking for NASA URLs, the links can't be broken, and the data has to be retrievable using only information found in the space record. And while this stage still is in progress, the general order of effort for this was to do the publisher-specific methods after doing the common method of the happy server. But I only reached the happy server for this project. So, as I mentioned before, here are the priority rules I had to follow when extracting the space metadata. And as you'll notice here are all the metadata that we extracted for this project. And some key things to note here are that the author, publisher, and dataset name fields all have multiple locations from which to extract data. And this shouldn't be the case. So this is one area of improvement. However, another thing to note is that the metadata fields here in this orange box are needed for citation, and the fields that are green are needed for current policy compliance. And diving right into our first set of preliminary results, we have the metadata distribution chart, and this is on all the records in the NASA Space GitHub, which is a little bit over 3,000. Notice here at the bottom, here are all the metadata fields that we extracted, and the fields that are orange are needed for citation. The fields that are dashed are needed for compliance, and everything else is blue. So the biggest takeaway from this chart is that all records are missing the CC0 license in the metadata, and that over 1,000 records only need a publication year to get a DOI. Another thing we can notice is that not all of the records have NASA URLs, but I'll touch on this a little bit further on. And for the CC0 license, this is something new. So we kind of expected this to be 0, as this isn't really capable, like Space Record isn't really capable of having this yet. However, besides all this, we're doing reasonably well. And for our next set of results, we have the fair score calculations. And for every record, it gets 1 point for each of these fields that it has out of 10 possible points. Again, it's over the same 3,033 records in the NASA Space GitHub. And the biggest takeaway from this chart is that over half of the records have a 9 out of 10 fair score, and the average is a little bit over a 7 out of 10 fair score. Also notice that none of them have a perfect score, and of course this is due to the license issue. And going into our second stage of the project, again, this is still in progress, but so far what I've done for this stage is to collect all the product keys associated with the happy links in the database. And for each of these, I'd get a start date from the initial info check. I did this using Happy Client. And then I attempt to retrieve data at increasing intervals after the start date. And what I mean by that is that I manipulate the stop date to be a certain time frame after the start date. So for the first interval, this would be a second. So I try to retrieve data at just a second of data. And there are multiple possibilities that can happen. So data can be found. If so, great. We move on to the next data set. Or no data is found at that interval, in which case we then try the next interval, which would be 10 seconds. This would repeat for all 9 intervals until data is found, or no data is found because we ran out of intervals to try, in which case we'd record this as a failure. Note that if any of the intervals timed out, we'd also keep track of that data set to then try again later. Also, the intervals that we tried were a second, 10 seconds, a minute, 10 minutes, an hour, a day, 3 days, a week, and then a month. Again, this code is written and still being tested. However, I do have some preliminary results for you. One thing to note is that for the space records that have multiple happy links, these results are only for trying out one of those links. So this is a little bit over 1,600 total. And this chart summarizes the results well. In total, I did 4 runs of the script, and the results kind of varied a little bit, as you'll see. So for the first time, around 3/4 of the data was retrieved, around 1/4 of it timed out, and a smaller percentage were broken or not found. And for each progressive script run, I tested on just the links that failed or timed out. And for each run, we see that the numbers keep changing, but that more and more are successfully getting data. And here are the most recent results that we have. So again, the ones that failed or timed out were simply those that failed to pass the initial info check, in which case that would be, a happy error was raised, or they timed out at all intervals. Some potential causes for this are because of the current security measures that are implemented with the happy servers. Some potential solutions for this would be to rerun these data sets again the same day, or to have a new version of the C2Web happy service. As far as future work for this project, we could keep going down the path of data availability. And this would be to check the product keys, the multiple product keys, to see if the record's any different, the results are any different for that. We could also extend the FAIR analysis to the space dataset web pages, extend the work to the non-happy data access methods. As I previously mentioned, this would be the publisher-specific methods. We could apply the FAIR testing logic to the metadata in a content management system, develop this into a third-party app to give projected FAIR scores on the space records, which could be incorporated into future HDRL data submission interfaces. Or for the big one here, we could incorporate the FAIR score capability into the HSSI and PyHC software submission interfaces. So in conclusion, we discovered that over half of the records have a 9 out of 10 FAIR score. The average FAIR score for all records is a little bit over 7 out of 10. That no records have the correct license identifiers. That over 1,000 records just need a publication year to get a DOI. Around 800 records don't have NASA URLs. And that there are complex rules for extracting desired metadata. So for the license and publication year, these are both easy fixes. However, for publication year, we would need a complete author list for those records. And for the NASA URLs, it's important to note too that the 800 records, within those, there could be some that are classified as NASA URLs. However, we just need to get more confirmation on those. And then for the metadata extraction, those fields that have multiple locations, that would be quite hard to fix. This would need probably a complete overhaul, Space 3.0. The license would be, high impact, but these findings have already led to ongoing improvements for the space records. So this project has successfully met its goal of being a guide to prioritizing improvements to FAIR at HDRL. And with that, I'd like to thank both my mentors, Dr. Ringette and Dr. Thomas, John Vandegrift and the rest of the Happy team, as well as Kazini personnel for his help with SQLite. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening and welcome any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Zach?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in there and say that this was super cool. Thank you for sharing about it. I'm almost surprised this is the first time I'm seeing someone actually building a tool to automate checking how fair things are. It seems like it would have been almost low-hanging fruit, right? But I guess it takes someone to jump in and do it first. So happy to see you doing it.
Thank you.
One quick thing. Do you know any reason why exactly 0 of the projects had that license?
I should probably take that question. So the idea of a CC0 license for data is recent in the past few years. So that's a new thing. And if you've heard about the space metadata model and anything about its history, you know it's at least older than that idea. So that capability isn't even in the space data model. So that's why there is no indication of CC0 license. It's in that relative field, it just says open, which
Ah,
right. So the change that's going on right now, and it's in process, is they're changing the model to accept the SPDX identifier. So when that is there, it's going to be an easy thing to automatically populate all NASA space records with that CC0 license. There'll be some exceptions, particularly for solar data, where that is under control of memorandums with other countries and such things. But yeah, that's why it's a 0 right now, and we knew it would be 0. We're not trying to make HDRL look bad, but it's 0 now, and it's gonna be close to 3,000 in a few months, so yeah.
great. I'm glad to hear that the lowest hanging fruit there is actually already on the horizon.
Oh, yeah.
And sorry if I missed this at the very beginning here, but what was it that you were like pulling space records from to look at the metadata and all of this stuff?
You're talking about like the NASA Space GitHub? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I know what space metadata is, but maybe I'm just not familiar with like the specific repo you were talking about or something.
I can throw a link to that in the chat if you would like, Zach.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right, working on it.
Yeah, if you could, I'd like to look at that.
Yeah, all of the space records are stored in GitHub repos. So there's other repos for the other agencies and other countries, all in the same area. Well, mostly all in the same area.
Ah,
So one
yes.
reason I was poking at Zach to get his presentation approved here is because of Julie's announcement earlier for the heliophysics software search interface. So yeah, software people probably don't care about metadata for data. I get it, okay? But the point of this is that, okay, if we want to have, I'm assuming we're going to have something similar there for the software metadata. But these are the kinds of fields that are the most basic, right? The orange ones right here, that's what you need to create a citation. That's what you need to have in there when you do that GitHub to Zenodo link to get a DOI for your repository. The URL's taken care of in the process. That's not a big deal. Adding a description is helps the search results, right? And you have to choose a license on Zenodo anyway. So we could have something like this for software for the heliophysics software search interface. That's why I was poking at this group with this. So don't
No,
blame Zach if you are bored. Just blame me, okay?
no, I absolutely think that would be a great addition to our search interface. I mean, that's yeah, what better thing could you have, really?
Well, so the SQLite part of Zach's work would be directly applicable. We would have to have something different because we're not going to be working with space metadata. So part of the code is reusable for that purpose, but not all of it.
Yeah.
I'll hush so Zach can talk. I feel like I'm talking too much.
Nope. Looking forward to that. And I guess Zach, I could just ask you, did you have, I mean, interest in getting directly involved with, doing development with this HSSI project? Because, definitely feels on the table to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, awesome. There you go, Julie.
Yeah, we should chat offline a bit more about that.
Yep, I'd agree with that. Yeah, sorry. I also don't want to be hogging the floor too much either. I feel like I am also doing that. So if anyone else had questions here, please feel free to jump in.
I remember right, there was something about a NASA URL and like records that had it versus not. And if I recall correctly, sorry, my cat, it was labeled as either easy or hard, one of the two. I think it was hard to fix or something. Not easy. Okay. That's why I couldn't remember easy or hard. Why is it not easy? And why do most records or some records not have it?
Yeah, from what I understand, of those 800, there are some that could possibly be classified as NASA URLs. We would just have to kind of go around and see, okay, like confirm with the right people. Okay, will this be okay to classify as a NASA URL? Some people may say it is. Some people may say it's not. That's why, if I'm getting it correct here, that it says not easy. that it would not be easy.
I'll back you up on it. So it's part of it is because some of the data is hosted at other places. In fact, that's the entire reason. Some of those places, it wasn't obvious that it was a NASA accepted place. For example, Bobby, you're going to correct me, I hope, if I'm wrong. But a good chunk of the data was at a planetary. I don't remember the acronym. It's PDS. Some
Nodes,
sort of no.
PDS nodes.
Okay. Thank you. Planetary, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's at a planetary repository, but it wasn't obvious from the link itself. There wasn't GSFC for Goddard, no NASA, no .gov or anything. So that has to be corrected in code. But some of them, it's because we don't have a copy of the data at a NASA repository because that's the current condition of data transfer. Okay, it's much. If you dive into the details, it gets nasty, it gets complex, right? So that's why it's not easy. I hope I backed you up well enough. I do have to drop, so try not to ask Zach any really hard questions because that should probably be directed to me. But Bobby,
Yeah, I
but
can
I'm
help.
sure Bobby can back. Thank you, thank you. I do have to go. Thank you all for giving Zach this space to talk about his work, even though it's maybe on the outskirts of PyHC interest. But there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, some of the data are not ones we're ever going to put into the archives, but somebody made a space record to point to them, which was a good thing. And that's just what it is. I mean, some of them are just in formats that we would never archive, but the data are probably in other formats that are at NASA archives. So. And there may be some in there that we should be pulling in, but it would take some work to go through them and figure that out. So.
Well, when he says NASA URL, is he talking just about the happy URL? Because that would seem to be the only one he's checking.
No, he was looking for a NASA.gov address, but the PDS
in any of the access URLs.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
If a record had any access URL that had NASA.gov, he would count it positively, but but the PDS nodes are not NASA.gov addresses, so and that guess that's true of the Earth Science DAX as well, or at least some of them. So
I know there's a lot of happy links missing for CETA-Web data sets.
yeah, I mean, there's all that sort of cleanup to be done too, but metadata is hard in itself. So, and, I mean, getting good metadata, keeping it up to date.
I guess I don't understand why it has to be NASA here. I guess it's the repository has data.
I'm not sure where that requirement came from. Rebecca has dropped off, but yeah, she sees that requirement in one of the NASA data policies, but I'm not sure I've seen it. I haven't noticed it that way, but you know, a close reading of it probably did say that. So. But I'm sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have another question about the iteration. The project tested something first and then repeated like 3 or 4 times. What was changed from each iteration, and that the numbers keep changing? I didn't understand that.
Yeah. So the first time, the first change, really the only change was that I'm making it a smaller amount of requests. The first time it was for all 1,600 records. The second time it was just for these 250 that failed or timed out. Because of how the Happy server, the security measures, as I said, the way they prevent denial of service attacks, they kind of limit the amount of requests you can do in a certain time period. So like, for instance, let's say, so this first try here had like 400 that timed out. That was because I was kind of overloading it a little bit. I didn't provide enough buffer between requests. So I know the big jump here was having an extra 5 seconds between requests. And besides that, it was just having smaller and smaller total ones that I passed to the script.
Okay,
The
thank
the
you.
SPDF services have denial of service limitations, so we restrict the number of requests you can make from a particular IP address per second,
Okay.
and a few other limitations that keep us from getting overwhelmed by some particular place. And we do see actual attacks regularly. So,
Okay,
and the
makes
happy
sense.
server, as he pointed out, is some old code written by somebody that's no longer around, and it has its issues. So Jeremy Faden is rewriting it for us. So hopefully some of those issues go away. Particularly every day, it takes an hour or so to get started because it tries to rebuild its database. But while it's rebuilding it, it doesn't take any inputs.
Jeremy's already fixed that. That doesn't happen anymore.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
That
okay.
hasn't
Oh,
happened
good.
for many months.
Oh, okay. Well, I was
For-
assuming that's what he was seeing, that
No,
Zach was seeing. Oh, okay.
no, that's not it.
Oh, okay.
That does not happen anymore.
Okay. Well, then it's probably just trying to call it too quickly.
Well, and I'm not sure that that happy server doesn't have the same limits as the web services does.
Well, but there is the IP tables limitations.
But that would only be if he's dropping the connection, and he would have to do something very special in his Python code to do that. It's going to use a persistent HTTP
Oh,
session.
okay.
So I don't think it's hitting that either.
Oh, okay. Huh. Well, maybe it just takes too long to handle a request, and
Yeah, it would take more testing or something to see what's actually happening. But there's no obvious limitations that I think he could be running into.
oh, okay. Okay, well, that's what I was thinking. It was the old problems we were having.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, one thing I would notice, like, when I was testing it, for instance, um, there are some data sets in there that I request info from, and it would be marked as a failure by my code because all the intervals didn't get data. I tried again. One of the intervals would get data. Let's say it would be, I don't know, the minute interval. If I then rerun the script again, it would get data at a second interval. So there's definitely something there that you know is limiting me from retrieving the data. So
For Bernie's case, he's trying to figure out when to call. I mean, what time period to call that particular data set. But you still get a response even if there's no data
Yeah, I mean,
for that time period. So
trying to find data is a little bit of a guess, but you should get back yes or no pretty quick.
yeah, I know. Like if there was no data at all, it would send a happy error. So that would be in the category of the broken one, or not found even. But as far as the ones that maybe have data, but my script didn't successfully get some, that would still fall into the failed or timed out. My script would just take longer than 10 seconds. And then but even before I had that sort of limit, there would be some that I'd get data, but it would take, I don't know, it would take like a minute and a half, 2 minutes just to get like a second of data. And for, trying to do this for over 1,600 records, that can, that's a little bit too much time that I'm willing to wait.
Well, some burst data sets, even a second is a lot of data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. And the not found, some of those are because in the space record, it records the variable's name as it is in the original data file that's been archived. But on Happy, it doesn't always use that exact name if there were spaces or special characters and various things. Then I think that returns a different name. So you have to actually bootstrap, you can't just automatically ask for that variable name.
Well,
From the space record.
that problem, you would have gotten a 500 response from the server if you'd run into that. I mean, and that's only been fixed in the last week or two.
Mm-hmm.
So that he could have run into that, but that you ask for the data and you would get a 500 response back. If it was a virtual variable and with weird characters in it. If you requested a virtual variable value that had a weird character in it, you could have gotten a 500, until just a week or two ago.
But doesn't Happy doesn't support all of the character set, does it?
No, Happy does.
Happy
supports
does. Oh, okay.
Unicode
Okay.
in your variable names if you want. We don't have any, but
Yeah, the ones that weren't found, I'd get the specific Happy error, and it would say unknown dataset ID.
well, that
may be an incorrect ID in the
space record, yeah,
space
maybe.
record. Anyway, it's not super of interest to everybody else, probably.
But Bob Weigel's tried all the data sets. I think, he knows the troublesome ones too. You can compare with him.
Right.
Although, like I say, I don't know how often he's run it, whether he's run it since that latest fix for the variable names.
This last one was, I want to say, what, Friday, not last Friday, but the Friday before that.
That's close to when that last fix went in. I don't, I'd have to go look.
Yeah.
But the other thing, I guess it's not that important, but you mentioned that the JSON LD that's in those space that's generated from the space has a license, has the data, has a license in it. So you said at one point you could have looked at this other metadata that's in the web page, and if you'd have looked at that, you'd have got a license for everything, every space record.
Yeah, that was a goal for the project, to compare it to what we can get from the web pages as well. But more time was devoted to the Happy data access.
Yeah, that second bullet there, if you went to those, you would have gotten a license for everything.
Yeah.
We have any remaining questions not related to this for Zach? If not, thank you again for presenting, Zach. This was very interesting, and I imagine we'll be in chats further with integrating into the HSSI and PyHC and so forth in the future. So yeah, round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure thing. Now with our remaining time, we're gonna go through a quick vote for FEP2. I don't know, Sean, if you wanted to just quickly 1-minute elevator pitch it in case anyone isn't aware of what that is here. It's a pretty straightforward one.
Yeah. I figured that would be reasonable, and I can share my screen here. Just give me 1 second. And make sure I click the right browser window. Right. I believe this is the one. There we go. Hopefully people are seeing GitHub.
Yep.
Yep. So this was, if you remember, FEP1 was approved not that long ago, which was just the first implementation of what these documents are even going to be. And at the same time that John Niehoff wrote that first one, he also wrote FEP2, which is just a template. And for anyone who hasn't looked at this or had a chance to check out the link, it's basically just all of the sections that you need to write a FEP, like an abstract, motivation, rationale, specification, etc. And it's set up in this nice self-explanatory way where each section not only describes what should be in the section when you're writing a new FEP, but it also fills out the information for itself. So FEP2 is itself a valid FEP, and it teaches you how to make one, which is pretty sweet. And it's pretty short and concise. And both me and Julie used this as the starting point for the things that we wrote, and we both really liked the process of using it. There's been some comments and stuff back and forth on improving this thing. But for the most part, it kind of remained as it was when John first drafted it because he did a really good job the first time. So yeah, it reminding people how the rules work for voting on these FEPs. It's always a two-stage vote where we have one stage at, a telecon or other kind of maybe more informal meeting, and then a second more final vote at one of our biannual meetings like the spring or the fall meeting. So this will be vote number 1. And if that passes, then we will basically put a hold on it and wait until probably, I guess, the spring meeting. We don't have a fall meeting, I don't think. So,
False, we do have a fall meeting.
oh, false, we do have a fall meeting. So then at the fall meeting, that will be the second vote for this. But yeah, I guess I don't really have any more introduction there. So you can vote. Do you remember, do we just say yes or no or abstain, or are we doing yays and nays?
I honestly will accept either.
Yeah, I'm not picky about that either.
Just make
And
it obvious in the chat, your sentiments.
yeah, and the last time we did this, we just kind of said to everyone, hey, all right, go write yes, no, or abstain as a comment in the chat, and then the chat here that we say the text of will just be the formal record for that vote. So yeah, for the 12 of us here, want to go ahead and do that. I will go ahead and just say to everyone, FEP2 votes below : boom, and go crazy.
Got half the people in the room voting.
And we could sit here on this for like a minute or two. Obviously the top of the hour is not here yet, and I want people to give a second to like actually ponder this and give it some real thought if they want to. So I'm not trying to rush.
But yeah, while people are thinking and writing, I know we still have at least 5 people here that haven't responded yet. We will have a fall meeting. It's in November, and I need to pull up a calendar to remember that exact date. But it's gonna share the floor. Half the week will be the PyHC fall meeting, and it will be hybrid. So there's an in-person component for that one. Planning underway very shortly, but it'll be co-located with the next science data system workshop that I believe will also be at LASP. So I was gonna take a pulse of the community because I think it is on a holiday week for only federal employees that Monday. I forget if it's Indigenous Peoples Day, some people call it Columbus Day. But it's like that's that Monday, and then the rest of the week is normal. We don't have it off at last, but I know not everyone gets that day off, but we may be using that week. Yeah, we might be having our meeting as part of that Monday, or we could have it at the second half of the week. So I'll get a pulse for the community's feeling on that in a little bit. Let's see how many votes we got. I know Rebecca also voted before leaving, so we can just
Yep.
put her vote into
This
here.
was up earlier in the chat.
And you don't have to necessarily have a package in the PyHC community as long as you're involved in the community to vote. So I want to emphasize that for some of the remaining people here in the chat.
Well, should we just give it like 1 or 2 more minutes and close the window, perhaps?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yep.
Any thoughts or comments in the meantime? No deal. Okay, I'll look it up. Well, please. Looks, aha, the week of the 11th of November. I always thought Indigenous Day was the same as Columbus Day because they were trying to move away from Columbus Day. But maybe I have it wrong. I'm full of it. It's in dash. You're right, Nabil. There is some holiday that is November 11th, and I feel really bad not remembering what it is. Veterans Day. Oh my goodness. I'm a bad American. Yep. I know that it's kind of touch and go what people have that day off versus who don't. We don't at last. So we consider it a normal working day. Seems like we've pretty much wrapped up voting though. I'm going to assume anyone who hasn't voted in the chat is an abstain. So
That would also be my assumption.
let me put in some.
So I am only seeing yeses here. So it would appear that that has passed the first vote. Woohoo, yay, formal processes.
Congrats. Our next FEP officially has a vote happening. All right. Well, that being the case, I guess we can go ahead and wrap up today's telecon. Normally, we would have had a telecon in a week, which is not on our normal schedule. But that's because in 2 weeks' time, the PyHC core folks are meeting to continue discussing our monthly efforts of, unifying the community and making things better. So if you're on this call and you're part of that call, there's your reminder. But instead of having a telecon next week, we had to reschedule it. So our next telecon for the biweekly series will be on Monday, September 9th. So it's in 3 weeks' time. So be on the lookout for that. And thank you, everyone, for your attention and showing up today.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. And we will see you on September 9th. Yeah.